Hi everyone, Michael from Pixeesoft here. Welcome to our next daily Scrum. So yesterday we talked about Kubernetes and why it might not be the right choice for us and for our deployment. Well, I'm here today to tell you that we are going to use it and it is the right choice for us. So let me tell you what happened. So when I go standard daily Scrum board, you can see that the deploy API service, deploy auth service changed a little bit and now actually has Kubernetes YAML in repo. So what happened? Why did we change yet again? Well, the thing is, if you want to have a simple SSL certificate on your GCE instance, on your compute engine instance, you can do it, just follow a blog post by Google, and you just go step by step, and you would think, well, since Cloud Run and App Engine and Firebase provision SSL for free by default, it would be basically drag and drop, right? Well, not exactly. So what happens there is that once you have your instance, you have to put a load balancer in front of it should you want an SSL certificate. And for those of you that have already worked with load balancers on GCP, you might already know that for a load balancer to work, for a load balancer to actually balance the load, you have to have some form of health check in place. You have to have some form of monitoring for the load balancer to know that the instance that it's meant to load balance is having some trouble, or it actually is up and running. And for those of you that saw the videos before, you might know that we have an instance that has a front end and back end on one Docker container, not having health endpoints. And for that specific reason, as I didn't want to touch the code inside, because I just want to take that one microservice and just replace it with a new one in future sprints, I didn't want to touch that code, and I didn't want to make that health endpoint. I just wanted to, basically I wanted to have the SSL for free. Now, I didn't know that this was the case with GCP and its load balancing nature. So what happened? Well, back to the drawing board, right? What do we do? So as I was doing the health endpoint, I was trying to bend it in my favor. I figured out, hey, if I have the endpoint, the health endpoint, and the end of this programming, might as well deploy the whole service in Kubernetes, right? Because we mentioned yesterday, if I have an instance running on GCE, Google Compute Engine, and I put a load balancer by hand, just by clicking in the console, I put a load balancer in front of it and I create the certificate again, just by hand, I'm putting myself in the vendor lock-in position. Now, if I have it in Kubernetes, I'm no longer in that position because I'm doing everything in YAML, in the YAML file. So that means that I can just take it and put it to a different cloud provider and it'll work the same. So, all right, back to the drawing board, back to Kubernetes. And it was quite a ride. So there is one trick that I had to figure out how to do it so that it works perfectly. So as I said, the container itself, the auth service, has two services running inside. It's the backend service and the front-end service. The backend service runs on a different port than the front-end service. The front-end service obviously runs on port 80. So the way it works is that you create a deployment, a service, and ingress, right? And the deployment can actually expose two ports. So you can create then two services, one for the port 80, one for the port wherever your API is running. The problem is that on deployment object in Kubernetes, you can only create one type of health check. So for instance, first when I created the health check for the front end, I put the liveliness and readiness probe on port 80, called health/check. It just returns status OK, 200, perfect, works great. But when I created service for the API, I did not have the option to create a readiness and liveliness probe for the specific other port. What do I do in this case? How can I do this so that the health check is correct? Well, thank goodness that the app itself, the front end and the back end, are in fact stateless. So I just created 2 deployments, and for each deployment, I created the readiness and liveliness probe accordingly to the health checks as I implemented them in the code. And I created separate services and hooked it up in Ingress. Now you would think that as we peeled all of those layers of that onion, finally when we reached the Ingress, everything would just magically work. No, it did not magically work. Problem being in the wildcard pattern matching for the URL. On the Ingress, you can define your own paths, but if you don't define your subpath with an asterisk, you will receive the default backend 404, and there are no logs for the default Google Cloud Load Balancer Ingress. So you turn it on and it's not working, and you're thinking, is it not working because there's a lag? Is it not working because Google is still making that load balancer? Or is it not working because there's some form of mistake? So in fact, I used the mock wallet service to test if the ingress or the YAML for the Kubernetes is correct, because I knew that it's a really simple service, so everything should just run. And that way I debugged, oh, okay, I don't have the path defined correctly. And so that was quite a ride. So I spent my time on that, and now I want to finally move on to deploying the API service. Thank goodness that deployment is exactly the same to the auth service. So for this one, it should really be copy paste, just put a different URL, different IP, and everything should just work, fingers crossed. So that's the one I'll be working on today. And then also you need to test the communication between the various services. Is it working with the auth service? Is it working with the API service? Is it working with the billing mock service? There's one catch, and one catch that it could be a technical debt, or it could just be an obstacle that I just quickly go over. And that is that if you deploy your API on a different port and you deploy it through an ingress, you have to have a subpath in it, /API. It's the same URL /API or whatever you put into it, right? And so if I put the /API into the path, you can already imagine, aha, but if you'll be calling that API from an existing application, that existing application might not know that you have a /API in the path. Aha. So there might be a problem in that. And I'll have to pay attention to it, that the other outside apps call it correctly. Even worse, they might call it correctly, but the application on the receiving part might not count on the fact that now there's a new subpath in the path of the calling and might not behave accordingly or as expected. So that is something to note, and yeah, I'll just have to debug that, and it'll be kind of funny to debug, but we'll see. All right, so that's about it for the planning of today. That's one day of work. So as we always say, quick and to the point, stand up as it should be. Thank you for watching. Thank you for tuning in to this live. I'll just take a quick look if there's anything in the chat. No questions in the chat. So I'll wrap it up here. Do check out all other social networks that we're on. That's Twitter, Instagram, Facebook. Subscribe if you haven't already. And check our blog, pixeesoft.blog. We post regularly there. So don't forget to check that out. And I'll see you tomorrow.